This is Saturday morning.
Hey, good morning, Lenny.
Good morning, George. This is Saturday morning with George and Phil. Lenny Newman here, pinch hitting for Phil, who I believe is on the road taking a family vacation. So you got the B team here with me. 22 minutes to help you become the best version of yourself, whether you found yourself in need of a fine-tuning of your family, finances, or fitness. This particular venue is set up so that we can just chat just like we're in a coffee shop. George and I, two guys having a cup of coffee. Fortunately, we've done that in the past, so this is actually, we're just now opening up our coffee to the rest of you. Glad you could join us this morning, and we do encourage questions. Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and we will certainly get to them. Today is episode 18, and we're talking about internal transition systems, basically building bridges within your organization and building your network. So, George, good morning. Great to see you on Saturday.
Hey, good morning, Lenny. Just for all the folks that are on here, what they don't realize is what leads up to, these shows. Phil and I, and we basically try to outline an agenda. So back and forth, probably the week before, we're basically going and outlining just a general discussion of what the topic is. And then we try to set up maybe some experts in the field that can help generate better answers to some of those challenging questions on the topic. So last night, late at night, I get this call from Phil saying, hey, I sure wish I could be there, but you know what? I've got a little bit of a family obligation, and we're actually rolling out on Saturday morning versus this evening. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I got to find a pitch hitter, and of course, Lenny and I, those who know, I've known Lenny for over 5 years, and I'm like, hey, Lenny, I really need your help. And within 30 seconds, you're like, of course, no problem. So that's where we're at here today. Again, thanks, Lenny, for jumping in. Before we get started, I want to talk about, all this month, we continue to be sponsored by Thrivent, and Thrivent believes that money is a tool and not a goal. The people at Thrivent, as well as Skip Nelson, have been helping folks, in career transition and finances really have a better life. One of the things that I've really been helping people is really trying to get better. And, the guys at Thrivent have done a phenomenal job, and their topic this month is really looking at your old 401ks and rolling those over IRAs. They helped me identify a lot of 401ks that I didn't even know existed, so finding money, when you really need money in career transition is definitely a positive. So anybody who's interested, I highly recommend reaching out to Skip Nelson. You can just take your phone and scan over that little indicator right there and set up a 1 hour free of charge consultation. These guys will definitely take you to the next level.
Well, George, many of our discussions, our last 17 episodes, have been really addressing networking outside to find new opportunities, to make a change, a career pivot. But this particular subject is pretty near and dear to me because I get a lot of questions about this myself. And that is, how do you network, within your organization? Because oftentimes, if you've been in an organization for, shall I say, a number of years, and maybe you're a sales professional and you want to move over into another part of the organization, that can be a little bit of a challenging, shall I say, undertaking. So that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today. And I'm curious, what your experience has been, George.
Yeah, it's a great topic, especially given the fact that we're undergoing the Great Recession, as well as a lot of baby boomers deciding, hey, my stock has really gotten to a point where I can actually retire. So, it's really in companies' best interest to help identify career paths for people. One of my second book that I'm looking and working on is really helping leaders get more engaged to really keep top talent. And one of the things that people don't realize is that you can actually network in a company in order to get even a better job.
So, George, help me understand. How do you go about that in a way so that you don't hurt your own career? Shall I say, hurt people's feelings who you may be working with or working for? Really, how do you do that without jeopardizing your current standing in the company?
Well, it's very similar to when you're out networking, is really try to understand the landscape, right? Understand your manager, and find out what that person, his or her ability ticks, right? Motivates them. That will help you kind of guide that conversation, because again, a manager, might think and heavily rely on your skills, abilities, and capabilities. And they may feel a little bit, let's say, south when you basically say, hey, I'm looking to move into another department, like you had stated, a product engineer moving into sales. But I think the overall scheme is that you're developing bench strength in an organization. So the right leaders are really going to be encouraged to have those conversations. I always tell people the best thing to do, hey, take your boss out for a coffee and get some discussion going, do some icebreakers.
So, suppose, George, I'm not all that particularly comfortable, having that conversation. My particular boss may or may not be willing to, shall I say, share with me his or her thoughts on greener pasture. How do I move forward with that without, shall I say, creating ill feelings?
Yeah, as I alluded to, we talked about personable board advisors in previous shows, and it's in the book.
Right.
Is that really developing relationships not only in your department but across your department? One of the gentlemen that I was working and coaching with was within a Fortune 500 company, been there for 15 years, like we had kind of kicked off the conversation. And he was saying, hey, you know what? I think I actually have to leave the organization. And one of the first questions I says, well, how many people do you know at your peer level across the business units? Long story short, he was able to develop relationships in a short period of time. In 6 months, found a new opportunity. Boss was happy, company was happy, and more importantly, he was happy because he was on a more progressive career path for the next few years. So I think it's a win-win for all company as well as the individual.
Talk a little bit about reaching possibly outside maybe your department, maybe internal mentors, other people in the company who you may have networked with, and how they might be able to, shall I say, be helpful to your search for other opportunities.
Yeah, if we stay on that kind of topic of the product engineer and sales, is really just reaching out, like I see it in the book. When you get prepared for an interview, is do some homework on the individuals, right? Find out what makes them tick, identify, 3 to 5 questions that you might generate a conversation with. And then more importantly, it's kind of a help, how can I help you? And then in turn, how they help you, you as well, maybe in your career progression within the organization, as well as maybe they're helping you kind of navigate your next decision in your overall career.
So what I think I hear you saying, George, is be prepared for those type conversations. Do your homework and try to make the conversation, shall I say, a two-way conversation. Helping each other, just like two friends having a cup of coffee.
Yeah, I mean, you and I always tell people the last part of the conversation is, how can I help you, right? And if you can turn around and help them in any particular way as that product engineer, you might be able to help sales, develop a little bit better understanding of their technical product capabilities, right?
So, well, I do know from one of your previous guests, his 5 famous words, how can I help you? I have found those particular words, thanks to our friend Larry Kay, those have been very, very helpful. And it really does, make a lot of sense to me. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, George.
Hey, but you know what? We don't have all the answers. Why don't we bring in somebody that might and actually has been working with a lot of organizations to do that? So welcome Carrie Hobbs to the show. Carrie, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to join the discussion today.
Well, good morning, Carrie. It's great to have you. It's nice to see you in our little virtual coffee shop. Love to get some thoughts from you relative to this discussion George and I were having about internal networking within an organization, and how we can be successful doing that.
Sure. I think that what it really starts with is a willingness to put the time and energy into building trusting relationships with people in those areas of the company that you really want to progress to or progress in. And honestly, if you're not clear on what area of the organization that might be, you don't know where you want to go from a product engineer or what else you might want to do. In my opinion, that's an even better situation, because the way you start building those relationships of trust is really by accessing your own ignorance, by asking questions to understand what's really important to the other person, meaning how do you contribute and what do you contribute to the success of your team every day? And then, of course, by listening intently to those answers. So not only does this provide you with a great opportunity to start building those relationships, it's also a way to learn more about the organization, how different people, how different roles contribute and play a part, and really kind of decide where you can best use your strengths to be a part of that.
So what I think I hear you saying, Carrie, is be very inquisitive. Ask lots of questions, and really, as I like to say, go into sponge mode where you're going to be absorbing as much as you possibly can.
Absolutely. Yeah. From everything I've read, that's the best way to start those relationships with people that you can help and that can also help you.
Any cautions or any advice on things to avoid as people begin to, shall I say, network within their own companies? Are there things you've observed or things you might be able to share to avoid?
Yeah, I think it hits similar to what George was mentioning earlier, especially if you're trying to get time with leaders who might be higher up in the organization. I would recommend going into those meetings, those relationship building times, really with a purpose, an outcome, expecting to kind of guide the conversation with those questions. Don't go in unprepared, and don't go in really with a very specific need to walk away with, here's what I do next. It really is an open conversation to learn, to understand, to start to put together the path that you may want to take to go up through the organization. So it's this fine line between don't go in not knowing what to do, because it'll make the meeting awkward. It'll make it a lot more difficult. But also you can't go in saying, I'm going to identify the job I'm going to next, because I think the leader will pick up on that, and that's not the intent of the meeting or the time together.
So I think what I heard you say was make it very conversational, very open-ended, and don't go in with any sort of preconceived expectations of what you're going to come out with. It's more of a get acquainted, get to know. It's more of a casual conversation like we're having right here.
Yeah, I mean, don't go in expecting that leader or that person to say, well, first you need to do this, and then you're going to do this, and then this is going to happen, and next that's going to, and then go to this. That's just not the way that progression through an organization works, in my opinion. So obviously go in prepared. Go in, as you said, Lenny, as a sponge, right? Accessing your ignorance is what I call it. Don't be afraid to show that right. You don't know exactly what that department is, but be confident in your ability to learn and understand and start to build those right relationships that might give you the in later.
Sure.
Hey, Carrie, one of our listeners has a question, Renee Roth, and actually reinforces it's so important to do that internal networking, but very few people do it. Her question is, what tips do you have for making it feel more natural and comfortable for all of us? We may have alluded to a little bit, but let's say I'm new to this. How do I make sure that it kind of comes off genuine?
Yeah. My best advice is don't expect it to be genuine the first time or maybe even the second time. Like everything in life and everything at work, it takes practice. Pick your first meetings kind of strategically with those leaders who might be more accessible, more open, I would say, and practice. Have your plan prepared, but not over prepared, as we were talking about. Go in and facilitate it and schedule some time right after that to reflect on what worked, what didn't work, what would I do different next time, and just expect it to be kind of awkward the first few times until you really find your way of doing it successfully.
Hey, Carrie, one thing, we're all hearing about the great resignation. I think we're all in the midst of it right now. I'm curious to get your thoughts on the balance between internal networking within a company versus external networking outside your company. Can you talk just a little bit about, the two and the different types of individuals, how they might use both those strategies?
Well, I think it comes down to the fact that we all only have so much time available to do what we need to do. So I think that decision is very much an individual decision based upon, your more near-term goals and objectives. If your objective is to try and stay in the organization and grow, I would definitely put more emphasis on that time with individuals and meetings. And it doesn't have to be outside of your normal routine, I would say. If you're going to be meeting with somebody in another area of the business that you don't typically interact with, you're going to be on a project team, you're going to try to find an extra 5 minutes during that time to start those conversations. It doesn't always have to be extra more. It doesn't have to be, it definitely shouldn't be, let's go spend an hour together. It's right. Really more like, let's go spend 10 or 15 minutes today. And maybe in a couple of weeks, I'll catch you again with some additional questions. And in a couple of weeks, it is definitely not a one and done. Now, if your goal is to open up and become known in your local area and start identifying some other opportunities outside the organization, I think you're going to flip that balance and start networking more outside. So it really is what your goal is.
Sure. One follow-on question in terms of, those internal discussions where you grab 5 or 10 minutes with someone. Any thoughts on, how you can, shall I say, reveal yourself to people that, you're in the organization and maybe it's across departments, any helpful hints, how to, shall I say, make you show a little bit better?
Well, so I think two things come to mind when you ask that question, Lenny. One is what I would call set the stage. So have your spiel, your little script ready to really explain to the other person very briefly a little bit about what your purpose is, what you're trying to achieve, just so they're very clear. So set the stage for that meeting being an open discussion where I'm trying to learn more about the organization as I grow my career and look for those next opportunities. Choose the words to set the stage there. And then I would also say that it really is just more, how do I want to say it? I think that it's about really, again, focusing on building that relationship, not necessarily on the outcomes of what that relationship is going to give you. Because I think that what's going on in your mind, what you're thinking about, how do I get my next opportunity? I'm really, I'm really feeling like I've been there, done this in this job. If that's what's going on in your mind, that's what's going to be conveyed to the other person. through your body language, through the words you choose, so you really have to be in that right frame of mind, I think, to avoid some of the pitfalls.
Well, the key things that I heard you say there that I picked up from your response, and thank you very much for helping me understand a little bit better the whole idea behind relationship building, whether it's internal within your company, which is what we're discussing this morning, or even outside. It's all about building relationships and not thinking about that next step, not thinking about what somebody can do for me. It's more about just building a relationship, period.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like I said, some people, I think, just aren't really comfortable with the key component of that, which is accessing your ignorance, right? I mean, the best way to build a relationship with the other person is to put them in the seat of being the one with the knowledge or information that you're really looking to absorb. So, well, it's a fine line between presenting yourself well, right? Presenting yourself as an open-minded, learning person, with the initiative to grow. It's also not about forcing your strengths out there. It's not about creating this as a time necessarily for you to shine or for you to talk about your accomplishments, because really the goal is to build that relationship, and it happens slowly over time and starts with a focus on the other person, with your questions and interest in them and what they do and how they have impact.
Hey, Gary, we're running out of time here, but one more last question right here is that
Sure.
how do leaders and companies do a better job in this post-pandemic environment to keep their talent and connecting those dots, right? Because again, we talked about, the Great Resignation. Lenny had talked about it. And, how do we keep those people engaged, and how do we identify them? And more importantly, how do they escalate their wants and needs?
Yeah. Well, I think, or I believe that keeping your talent today really comes down to two things, but they're really two very big things, right? Meaning, I think your ability to keep talent today really hinges on the company's ability and willingness, quite honestly, to develop a more inclusive leadership mindset. The whole command and control, authoritarian style of leading that is unfortunately very popular in business today, it just really isn't effective, and it hasn't been effective for a long time. So I think to keep your talent today, you have to be an organization that is willing and knows how to develop a very different learning mindset, a more inclusive mindset in your leaders. And then to support that, the second component that I think really makes a difference is also the capability and motivation to design an organization that really allows people the freedom to express themselves, and also then the opportunity to use their strengths to really explore, experiment, and learn new and better ways to create customer value. I've spent a lot of time kind of building out a model for this kind of design. I personally call it freedom within the framework, which really means the organization is looking at ways through rewards, through structures, through processes, through the skill sets and mindsets of its people, through its culture, which are all the components of an organizational system. They're really looking for ways to give people as much freedom and flexibility as they possibly can, while at the same time guiding and supporting them with the structure and the boundaries that are really essential for delivering what the stakeholders really need in the business. So it's this org system that's a fine line between freedom and flexibility, but doing it within the boundaries that still move the business forward towards the results. So I really think it's time to rethink how organizations operate today.
Well, there's a great book out there right now that's actually written by Hubert Jolie, the CEO of Best Buy, that's basically totally transformed a company that was on the ropes after Circuit City was, basically claiming bankruptcy. He turned the culture around. He's got a book out there called The Heart of the Business. Great book. And I believe that leaders who focus on culture realize that profitability and growth will come with that.
Yeah, I really think that amplifying those two things, it starts with having the right leadership mindset. So again, those leaders who are a lot less about the command and control and the authoritarian styles. But I think between those two components, your org design and your leadership mindset, you really can start to amplify the organization's effectiveness in delivering those results, like you said, George. But it also is being done on the things that really drive and fuel people's intrinsic motivations, the things that really lead to their happiness and make them want to commit to your organization for the long haul. So in my opinion, it's the best of both worlds for your business and for your people.
Well, hey, Carrie, I appreciate your time and coming on board.
Thank you so much, Carrie. It was a lot of fun.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate the conversation today.
Have a great Saturday.
You guys too. Bye.
Wow.
Well, George, it's been a lot of fun.
It has been a lot of fun. I love that topic, especially now, given the, the whole great resignation topics that are going around feverishly, and, the challenge with basically retaining talent in this whole competitive environment. I know many businesses out there are trying to do so, but you know what? We have a lot of people in the company that want to be a part of the company ongoing, but they just might be needing another direction, right? And when you do that, you get so much more out of them because they're reignited.
Well, I enjoyed Carrie. It was nice to see her pop in this morning. And one last thing before we close, I want to do a shameless plug for Hired. Cut your career search time in half. George, as many of you know, is an award-winning author. And for those of you who know people in transition who are looking for some assistance, please do suggest Hired. It's a phenomenal read. So, George, that's all I have for you this morning, buddy.
Hey, just before we wrap up our next show, if you guys like this, we're actually now streaming on Facebook and YouTube as well, live, and for actually the last probably 3 episodes. But our next episode, September 4th, is about consistency. Most successful in job transition. What are those? Interviewing process, being able to consistent. And, hey, while I'm employed, I might be, the opposite of, I just really got to get out of here. But, how do I turn around and be consistent at work and still add value for what I'm getting paid for? All the while potentially maybe having to look for another opportunity. Because, again, we've said it many times, looking for a job is a full-time job. So if you've got a full-time job already, that's really, a workload. So thank you, Lenny. I appreciate you pitch hitting in for us.
My pleasure, George. It was nice to see you this morning, and I enjoyed the conversation with Carrie as well.
Absolutely. What do you got planned this weekend? Anything exciting?
Just family time. Yeah. How about you, George?
I got to fix a belt on the bike. It blew, and it made me walk 10 miles to work or to home. All right. Enjoy your weekend.
Yep. We'll see you